Welcome back to the Always Better Than Yesterday interview sessions with me, Ryan Hartley. And today I am joined by my very special guest, Simon Tyler. Welcome, Simon.
Hello, Ryan. Thank you very much for getting me onto the show.
It's great to have you here. I'd love to know a little bit about your story, a little bit about your journey.
It's a big story, and I don't often jump into the space and try and elaborate the story, but my story is mine. It's made me who I am today. So a corporate career focused in sales and marketing, then went into consultancy. And it was during the consultancy phase, which was a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago or more, that I built a team of coaches. We called them coaches. Mm-hmm. And as I look back, I reflect, well, they weren't coaches. We were all just training needs analyzers. That's all we were, which I suppose is an aspect of coaching. And that was my first step into becoming a coach. And I left that consultant. I chose to break away on my own, not knowing what to do other than to set up another consulting company. And it sort of links to, I know, another question you like to ask, which is, how did I get influenced? And somebody who used to work for me had left herself, and she'd not left herself, but she'd left herself. And she was really focused. When I met her 2 or 3 months later for a coffee, she was really focused, really upbeat and purposeful about what she's doing. I thought, what on earth has happened to you? She said, I've been working with a coach. I said, really? She says, you should speak to him. American guy called Scott Wintrip. Really? Well, I don't think I talk to Americans. Just think how expensive that phone call will be. I'm not doing that. It's ridiculous. Cut elements of that story short. I ended up working with Scott over the course of 3 months, 12 weeks. Spoke to him every week. And I can remember it was 9 o'clock his time, so 2 p.m. my time, every Wednesday. And it was just a profound experience. This is 1999, probably, something like that. Maybe no, before that, whatever it was, I can't remember. And I realized that what he was doing in terms of his interest in me and my story and helping me get clarity and focus is that's what I do. When I'm in dialogue with people, that's what I do. So with his sort of encouragement and steer, I thought, right, I'm building a coaching business. And then it began in about the year 2000. Yeah, my first paid coaching client was in year 2000. So 20 years this year as a coach.
I love that. And I've seen on your website, you've coached for over 5,000 hours, 750 people, you've spoken at events, and you're the author of many books. And I just would love to know, where do you think, from all the things that you put out in your books about impact, simplicity, and attitude, what do you think is the most desired message to hear right now?
People who've read all of my books and perhaps also read the simple notes that I send out every couple of weeks and as podcasts as well, they will undoubtedly pick themes and threads that run through everything that I talk about. And to nub down exactly on your question, I would say now it's about accepting what is. That sounds obvious, and lots of people talk about it in different ways, but it's totally about just accepting what is. The better we can accept what is, coupled with maybe strengthening our let it go muscle, which is just letting just let it go by, the better we can be there, the purer we become in terms of our thoughts and our relationship to the emotion of our feelings. It means that more of us are available every single day to whatever shows up, as opposed to any resistance we might have.
I listened to your podcast recently about 2 questions that can help you be in the now. I'm just curious to know for our listeners what those 2 questions were.
Well, it's interesting. When I recorded that podcast, I was so certain, and quite often I reach points, maybe other people will listen to this, I reach points of saying, I know what it's all about. I know what it's all about. It's this. And that sensation lasts with me maybe for an hour, maybe a day. And I think, I know what's going on. I totally know what's going on. That's it. I've cracked it. I am a master. But then it just disappears. And I think, I don't know anything. I'm completely wrong. And I change it and I reiterate. So for me, in coaching terms, and these two questions work, and they sort of spin from that, which is what do you want and what stops you? I would say that's it. And you'll remember you were at an event I ran. I'm sure I must have mentioned it at that point, a year or so ago, which is what do you want? The more clarity you can have of what you want, and it's quite a curious one, and I'm prepared to understand that wanting is not a great state. I'll come back to that perhaps. But then what stops you? That's it. They're the two unlocking questions. And in some form, in every coaching dialogue I have, I will ask a version of what do you want several times, just to get clarity. What is it you want? What is it that's important about what you just said that you want? And try and get behind it. The more clarity we have over that, and often it's not £1 million, or it's not a super fast car, even though that might be your first answer. It's just slowly get behind it. And then the what stops you, for me, that provides me the conversation, the coaching dialogue with people to help people unlock what's currently slowing them down, stopping them, filling them with doubt, and shaking their belief system that says, even though I want a super fast car, I don't believe I ever really would deserve one. Okay, well, we've got a want, and we've got an upside down stopping point. It's not going to happen. So those two things, that's what I unravel as best I can in coaching dialogues.
Love that. You talked about that discovery in the late 90s around what you do best for other people. Like, how did you talk me through that period of self-awareness, self-development, and just knowing what it is that you wanted to do?
Almost off the record, Ryan, I never really know. And in the early part of my career, particularly when I was on my own, self-employed as a coach and facilitator, and then eventually became speaker, I would have regular periods of, what the hell am I doing? What? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing more? Should I be having other products? Should I have an online? And that caused disturbance, and that would take me off my middle. And as I've got older and wiser and grayer in my beard, I've become more easy at just accepting what shows up. You know, I've had some really tough things that have occurred in my life over the last 5 to 10 years. And at the time they were happening, I'd rather they wouldn't. But here I am now. In some respects, I'm glad they did, because they've made me who I am. So to go back to your question, how do I know what I've wanted? I've never been overly obsessed with goals, which is quite curious for a coach to say that. I'm not a totally goal-oriented person. I've learnt and worked really hard on myself to be much more now, here, this moment, and that's it. And yeah, that doesn't mean I've given up on a future and I don't plan, but I just allow things to be, and I trust how I feel about stuff and what I'm thinking about stuff, and I move in a direction. And it's interesting, I had a really dark, introspective, existential crisis almost in January and February this year, which I've now reflected about. I think how curious I had that, and I became very insular, dark, and the guy that works with me was saying, why don't you just get on? He was very good. He drags me out of the slow moving stuff. And I had that before we had this lockdown phase. And I think if I hadn't, I'd have experienced a much more of a bumpy ride through lockdown than I actually have. But in that period of time, I was pickling myself, thinking, you know, what am I up to? What am I doing? Where should I be going? And a coaching friend of mine shared the very simple red, amber, green traffic light story, which works in lots of different contexts. But this one is, for me, it was trying to check in with how I feel about something. When I was faced with, I should build this product and start telling people about this. And I would just think about those colors. I just think about the colors. Does it feel red? When a red feeling for me is, I don't want to do it. I feel distaste towards it, or I'm repelled from it. Genuinely, it's a red sensation. Is it a green sensation, which is yeah, I'm feeling myself drawn towards it. I want to do it. I want to do it. I'm going to do something.
Mm.
And I would drive myself into action. And then the amber one is, I'm not really sure. I'm just going to pause here. I'm going to wait for a bit more information. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. I'm not going to start taking action that I'm not sure of. I'm just going to let it sit in the amber color. And that, in a very simple technique, has helped me step away from stuff that I might have otherwise, part of my head has said, oh, Simon, you should do that. That's a should. You ought to do that. And I haven't. I let go of those really quickly. And I follow loads of green. That's the way I go.
Love that. One of the real takeaways that I took from that time when you spoke last year was this sense of 3-4-3. What is the 3-4-3 model?
3-4-3, and I was, again, so lucky that my head started to work this through how many years ago, because that has become something I talk about a lot. And 3-4-3, apart from being my favorite football formation, but it's not about that, because quite often when I talk about that to audiences, half the audience go, oh, it's a football metaphor. It's not. 3-4-3 notionally describes the 10 things that we're up to, the 10 things about us. And I describe it in terms of 3 are at the top. They are what you're brilliant at. They are the essence of you. They are you at your absolute ultimate best. When you're in the act of doing whatever those 3 things are, or being whoever those 3 things are as aspects of you, you feel awesome. You don't feel drained. You do them all day long and you don't feel exhausted. And it's probably the things that people talk about you behind your back. At the other end, at the bottom 3, are the things that are the drag, and they slow you down. They're the stuff that you'd rather not do. You put off forever. They accumulate. They start to stink because you think, oh, I need to get on with them. They're the things that are piling up on your desk or in your mind. And in the middle are the 4 things that come with the turf you're on right now, maybe the job you're doing right now, or the challenges you're thrusting yourselves at right now. And my secret recipe, if you like, that I try to say to people is, your life is about the top 3 things. Shift anything you can to spend more time doing those top 3 things. Outsource, pay someone, don't do, automate the bottom 3. And that's nothing what life is all about. What I notice with people is they have a sense of duty, guilt, responsibility, fear, stuck in process, and they put off their top 3 things while they're doing their bottom 3 things. I need to get these done before I do the things that I love. Why would you do that? It's ridiculous. And therefore I see people in corporation companies that I work with, and they perform poorly on their balanced scorecard or whatever it is every year. And in a few minutes of conversation, I realized that spending most of their days doing at best the middle 4, but probably lots of the bottom 3 skills and attributes and behaviors. Look, well, you're not going to succeed until you start shifting course, and it might sometimes be change your job to be doing top 3 things. That's when life is really cool. Things happen faster. You meet people who think like you or stretch your thinking when you're up in that top 3 area. I can get very passionate and go on for hours about this one, right?
I love that model. And I'll tell you why I love that model is because it gave me a framework of reference to explain something to my wife. So I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, right? And she has this notional idea, this pipe dream that when we're doing DIY, right, there's me doing the DIY and the kids helping daddy, that cute image. I become a monster when I do DIY. I hate it. I become a different version of myself. I lose all patience. And I was like, here we go. It's clearly in my bottom 3. I don't love it. It changes who I am. I need to do less of it. So you gave me the rationale to go back and go, stop the pipe dream. It's never going to happen.
Yeah. Because who knows, I don't know what it is in your story, but somewhere in your head might have been this little nudging, punching driver that says, you should do your own DIY. You should be good at this. You should be
what it means to be a man.
Carpentry and plumbing and so on. Really?
Yeah.
No. I remember talking a story years ago, which is my dream world is a world where everybody is doing what they love doing and they're brilliant at. Everybody,
Mm-hmm.
from the carpenter to the postman to the shopkeeper to the coach to whatever it is you're doing, everybody's doing what they love doing and they're brilliant at. That would just be fantastic. And when I've got something to do that's not what I'm brilliant at, I get someone who is. And life flows.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your definition of attitude and why is it important?
Well, that came up. That's in the cycle of my book productivity, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Attitude was becoming more and more obvious that that's what I was working on with people. I was helping them shift their attitude, and attitude is a bit like a magnet. Once you have an attitude, and perhaps you've carried it for more than a few hours, it magnetically attracts situations, people, thinking, emotions, events that are aligned and magnetically drawn to it. So if things aren't showing up in your life the way you'd prefer them to, then maybe one of the things you can control is your attitude. So I started to write the manuscript for that. And I remember the publisher saying, we needed it by whatever, they gave me a date, and I kept pushing the date back. I say, no, I'm not ready, darling, I'm not ready. There's more. But the more I started to talk to people about attitude, the more I was discovering. And it was quite a challenge for me to draw a line on the 50 chapters, which is, in essence, that was in the book suite that I'm in. Like, well, which ones do I cut out? Which one do I leave out? And how can I make one of the chapters bigger to include something else? Well, no, that would ruin it if I did that. So that was quite a productivity challenge for me, but I did it and it came out. And of course, as soon as it came out, I thought, well, there's 5 or 6 others I'd like to put in there, but they're not there. So when I talk at events about attitude, quite often I'll talk about 1 or 2 from the book and 3 or 4 other ones that have developed in my thinking since, which is cool. And it means the content is rich and renewing all the time. But attitude is, we don't realize how much choice we've got over it. And if we're not heightening our awareness all the time of what's influencing us, it goes off. And right now in the world, there are 7 billion attitudes that are at risk. They're at risk of what the media is telling you. They're at risk of what each of the governments sort of angle is on the pandemic and on Black Lives Matter and how the conversations are changing. And so there's a lot of attitudes at risk. And if we're not careful, it's just going to become somewhat chaotic.
Yeah. I think the title of your talk last year was Your Flipping Attitude. So taking that as a concept, how does one flip their attitude?
Yeah, and I use that as obviously a mildly provocative theme for a number of talks I did around that point. And the point is that you can flip your attitude, but it starts with awareness. And that's quite a brave step for most people, to either talk to someone about, what are you noticing about my attitude? If you were to describe the attitude you think I have most days, what would it be? So 1, you need awareness. That's the start point. The next point is, back to the what do I want? What would I like my attitude to be? What would I like to start attracting to me? What's in my attitude range? Because right now we all probably have a range that we're not really aware of, but we'll have a middling attitude, whatever that is for you, and you'll have where it goes on a bad day and potentially where it goes on a good day, but it's still probably quite a narrow attitude bandwidth. My point is, you can either broaden them, which means that potentially it's going to be a great attitude on wonderful days, but it could be pretty awful on other days. That's unhelpful. It's to realize where it is and then move your the bandwidth stays the same, but you just move it upwards, which means that your middle point needs to change. I've got a picture in my office which has served me so well as my midpoint through lots of different situations, not crises necessarily, but challenge situations. And it simply says, everything is going to be okay. It's a post in the middle of a field in probably, it looks like the Yorkshire Dales. I can't sure where the context is, but I look at that, I think it's true. Everything is going to be okay. Even if in the moment it doesn't feel like I'd like it to be this way, but everything's going to be okay. And that attitude has always lifted me and pulled me through and kept me open and positively oriented to what's coming next.
What are some of the things it's pulled you through?
I've had in my business career, I've had financial,
Mm.
what am I doing? Where's the next pound, dollar going to come from? And if you start, when you go through the self-employed journey, and you're on that journey too now, there are times when you think, well, how am I going to make this work? And that thought can often trigger, if you're not careful, maybe I won't make it work. What if I don't make it work? What are my contingency? And it doesn't feel good. Your mental state changes. You go back to the primitive core parts of the brain, and that part of the brain then becomes less creative. There's a famous-ish phrase that says it's very difficult to come up with a new idea when you've been chased by a tiger. and that's true, because when you're being chased by the tiger, you go to primitive brain, bang, just get on, flight, whatever you're going to do. And the creativity parts of the brain are closed off. And that's the case when your thinking goes down, this is really bad situation. So to answer your question, I've had that. I had, my marriage ended now 8 years ago. That was a really tough time. I was thinking, what? And I caught myself. I remember I was living in this is another dark night of the soul. And I was sitting in a rented flat in a small courtyard with no view of anything. I had a knife, a fork, one plate, no internet signal. There was hardly any 3G or any signal in there at all. So I was completely cut off. No phone, no television channels. How did this happen? And that was really tough. That took a bit of climbing through. And I reached out. I got a lot of help from my network that helped me get through. And I guess without that, I wouldn't have grown as I have over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And one of the interesting lines that I found on your website is that you help people, or you help liberate individual potential. What do you help liberate people from?
At risk of being a bit woo-woo, as the people describe,
like
people talking. When I meet people, I get a strong sense for the bigger version of who they are. So their glow, their aura, if you like, sometimes has been described. I sense that. And I can also see, and I'm not a mind reader, we can all do this, it's just that perhaps I practice this and work at this more often. I can look at people, look at how they're holding themselves, their facial expression, the words they use, their turns of phrase, and the body cues, and get a sense for where they're stuck. I'm not always right, they're just inklings. And I trust it. As the inklings bubble up, I might share them. I say, it's just an inkling. You know, I'm 2/3 of the time I'm right-ish. And that's why I do what I do, to liberate people, to help them access whatever their inklings of desire are. Because people get stuck. Back to what we said at the top of the conversation, what do you want, what stops you? I just get people moving. Even if it's their thinking that's moving, and even if it's just accepting what's going on. Because the emotional journey that we're all on, particularly under this current sort of lockdown situation we're all in, emotions are coming and going that in the old normal, we probably wouldn't have dwelled on the emotion that comes in. And the clue in the word emotion is the word motion comprises it. They're on the move all the time. But now what's happening is we sit in our own isolated offices, desks, lounges, we hold on to that emotion and almost embed it, and it might not be the best one to hold on to. So my job is to help people notice these things, become more peacefully oriented towards who they are and what's going on their journey, and then liberate them and get them in real motion towards. And sometimes it happens really quickly, not always, but happens really quickly when people just it's that. Here we go.
Love that. Sometimes we can overcomplicate things. Why did you write The Simple Way?
Because my name's Simon. Uh, partly, I grew up being called Simple Simon, as I talk to people about, and it felt like a derogatory way of describing me. So I spent most of my teen years and early work years trying to prove to people I'm not simple. I'm really, really complicated and super intelligent. And of course, that wasn't really the case. And it wasn't until I was coached by a guy called, another one of my coaches, Drew Roselle, which was maybe 14 years ago, 15 years ago. And he said, why don't you just accept it? I said, what do you mean? He says, why don't you just accept simple as the hill on which you stand? Oh, there was a stony silence, because it's almost accepting what I've been trying to reject all my life. I thought, oh, okay. So I did, because in essence, that's the way I approach things. If I don't understand stuff, I will ask the question, you know, what do you mean? Can you say that again in a different way for me? And I've never held back in trying to understand stuff by asking the simple question. And that's probably fed through my coaching too. So I started to write my simple notes. They were every week when I first started, because I was obviously really productive and I don't know what I was writing. Yeah, really keen, trying to prove something to somebody that was me. And a client of mine said, in fact, it was when all my business went south, one of those financial moments. My business went south, the marriage was nearing its end. This was 2011. And I thought, oh, what's going on? And it was in a month where I invoiced nothing. First month in my entire, and still now, my entire self-employed career where I invoiced nothing. It's like, this is not a good situation. I just lost a lot of situations, client feed points. And a client emailed me and said, your simple notes, I've got them all in a folder because I read some, but I want to keep them because I think they're all good. Have you got just a way in which you could collect them together for me? And it was, it's a book.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it. So I grabbed, and I'd written over 50 of them then. I grabbed them, sent the emails out to loads of publishers. They all said no. They were, who the hell are you? I've got this great book, Simple Way. It's 50 or more ways that people can simplify everyday situations. No one, and I was just about to go self-published, and I'd written the check. It was £2,500 to a stock point where they would print a core stock and put it on their distribution list. So it was a semi-published, but I was paying for all the work. When through a contact of a contact, a publisher rang me and said, I've heard about your book. Can you send me the manuscript? Really like it. We'll do it. Really? So I ripped up the £2,500 check and got an advance, because that's the old way that books used to work, on advance instead. This is amazing. So that was the Simple Way. That was the first book. And then since that time, the guy who ran that publisher joined another big European publisher, Lid Publishing, and then I've moved all my titles through them. So that's now become, as you mentioned already, the Impact book, the Attitude book, and the Keep It Simple book with them.
What are some of the top ways of simplifying life?
Well, I've mentioned probably my favorites in our conversation so far already, but there are a number of, and the thing with the ways, the 50 in the Keep It Simple book particularly, is not all of them will work in your situation. Not all of them will resonate with you. Scan the book. You don't have to read it front to back. You can open it up randomly. You can pick a number between 1 and 50 and just go to that number and read that one. There will be some in there that will really resonate and think, that's so meaningful to me now. So situationally, I'm resisting answering that because it just depends. But there's one that I'm working with another coaching colleague some years ago, CIA. Have I mentioned CIA? Have we worked on CIA before? CIA is control it, influence it, accept it. Excuse me. Which is a bit like my traffic lights I mentioned earlier. Drink of water. Which any situation you're in that's not working out for you, before you let yourself get into some kind of battle with yourself, change your mood, change your feelings, you bring your own CIA in C, can I control the situation? Is there anything I can do to really control it, actively get involved and change it? Yes, do it. No, move to the next one. It's the I. Can I influence this? Are there people I can talk to? Are there companies that I can get involved that can shift the way this looks? Can I influence it in some way? Yes, do it. No, move to the A. The A is accept it. For now. That's the caveat. Because a lot of people think, I don't want to accept this situation because it's not a good situation. Okay, but if you're not accepting it, you're resisting it. You're in battling with it. And that doesn't bring the best of you or the situation. You're just going to further increase the friction between you and the situation. So accept it for now is, and I was talking on a webinar earlier this week about one of the life skills that I think will come to the fore through this period that we were working through is our ability, the muscle to let it go, which I mentioned earlier on, which is how good are you at letting things go? Which is if you drop your cup and smash your cup, how long do you hold that onto there? 5 minutes, an hour? You annoyed yourself? That was a nice cup I just smashed. That's a very simple example, but it applies through life as well, which is, can you just let things go? And that's part of the acceptance skill. I'm just going to accept this as it is. Doesn't mean I like it, doesn't mean I love it, doesn't mean I want it, but I'm just going to accept it. And that way you return back to your center, you become more poised. And in gym terms, for the people who go to the gym, understanding where your core is and getting to your core activates so much more of your body and makes every exercise you do more effective. It's the same, which is to find back to my core. And my core is, I'm just going to accept that as it is. And silly things, you're running an event and the laptop fails, so you've got no slides. Faster you can go through to acceptance, the better. And you move on, which you'll go through, your brain will go, oh, they're going to think you're an idiot. You've got no slides now. Whatever stories you hear, and it's how quickly you can move through that. Accept it and move on. So that's CIA. And there's many more. I could talk about all 50 of them. And they'll be interesting to one person to listen to this, which is our goal, to hopefully help at least one person.
At least. I think we've done that already, so let's go for 2. So I'd love to know, what is something that I haven't asked you about that you'd love to share with our audience?
Oh, there's a question, Ryan. What haven't you asked me? You haven't asked me what I'm up to right now.
Let's go there.
Because I'm a now person. And the challenge of lockdown, in some respects, I successfully shifted much of my business over to speaking and events over the last 4 or 5 years, which is wonderful until a country has a lockdown situation where events don't happen anymore. So my business fell off the proverbial financial cliff on March the 16th or whatever it was. That was the end. I had one very big client that just understandably canned everything. So it's, this is quite interesting. What does this mean for me? Don't know. And I've been able to sit with that, back to what I've said all the way through this, as peaceful as I can. It's okay. I've started to coach more. In the old days, I used to coach many, many people during a week. And that's down to a smaller number now. So I started to coach a few more people, which I quite like. And as a result, I'm open to, I changed my fee. I don't really have a fee. I have my corporate fee for coaching, but if somebody wants to coach with me and I think I'm the right coach for them, let's work together. We'll find the fee that works for you. It's irrelevant. To a degree. There has to be some transaction going on, but that's it. So I've done a bit more of that. I've done a lot more reflecting, and I'm not really a reflector. I've done a lot more. I suppose I've learned and been able to practice what I talk about, which is just allowing things to be. Yeah. I've enjoyed the space, mental and physical, just found it so peaceful. I think I'm a calmer version of me than I was even at the start of this period. So I'm learning to webinar. I've written many simple notes over the last 2 months about what I'm noticing about how people are interacting through webinar, because we're getting used to that as maybe that is in new normal, and as that comes, we're going to be doing this much more often. And the energy transfer between people is different. We don't realize it, but as I wrote in the simple notes just gone out this week, a bit like taking a food product out of your diet, you don't notice it's missing straight away, but after a period of time, your body then will start to respond and say, I'm noticing that I've got a vitamin missing here, and they'll start to react in other ways. And I'm noticing that in the energy transfer we're getting through this, we don't get the real true haptics, the physical clues between people. Eye contact is different. Some people with their camera, they might be looking up, they might be looking down. So actual eye contact with people is different. Laughter has changed. People don't laugh on webinars as much. Human beings need to hear laughter to start laughing. That's why you have canned laughter on TV comedy programs. So quite often somebody will be sitting at the webinar, and that quiet little nod is the equivalent of a rolling laugh in a room. So it's different. So the energy exchange it can leave people feeling a little bit bereft. And as a result, it compounds perhaps mini anxiety that people are experiencing. And when you have anxiety, that starts the body response. And there's a big subject, we perhaps need to clip this, but when little bits of anxiety start, before it gets to being a serious mental health issue, the body goes in, broadly speaking, one of two ways. It adopts, I'm vulnerable, so it thinks it's vulnerable, or it becomes more vigilant, which is based on fight or flight. So the vigilant route, it means it turns up adrenaline. So your adrenal activity has gone up, just as a result of these tiny little bits of anxiety. As a result, you feel more tired. So many people I've spoken to, they're saying, I haven't got the commute to work anymore. I'm sleeping probably an hour longer, at least, than I used to. And yet I feel tired during the days. Well, this is part of it. Adrenally, we're not realizing that we're probably in a vigilant state all the time, keeping half an eye on the media stream, which is not very helpful because it doesn't know what it's going to report. The fact and fiction stuff it affects you. Anyway, that's a big subject, and I talk about that a lot in recent simple notes.
I'm going to plant a seed. I don't know whether you're going to let this one grow or not, but I think after 2020, people are going to want a simple year. They're going to want 365 days worth of simple notes. Maybe that'll be a Christmas bestseller.
It won't be me writing them, though. I think we're up to now, we've written, I've written, and Simon, the guy who works with me, we work through them together. I think we're up to 178. So it's not quite a year's worth, and about 50 or more of them are now in podcast form. So too.
Good. Maybe by Christmas you'll have a year's worth. Don't never say never. 2021 might be the year.
Thanks for the push, Ryan. Thanks for the push.
You're welcome. My ethos is about helping people be always better than yesterday. Just curious to know what that phrase, always better than yesterday, means to you.
I thought about that a lot because I knew that was one of the main questions you're going to ask me. And my first response when I dwelt on that is, I get that, and I love that as your theme and what you stand for, and I think it's wonderfully effective, and you bring so much positivity around that for people. But my second response was, I don't mind what yesterday was. I don't care, because it's today. So if today, if I was to look and compare, isn't as good as yesterday, well, I'm okay with that. Because I'm a day older and I've taken that with me. So I suppose I'm making today a better day than yesterday. But I'm worked so hard, as I said, on being now, or I'm here now. Is there stuff I can learn from that? I used, in a piece I'm working on with a company, we're using the metaphor of the Grandmaster chess champion and their relationship to now, the future, and the past. They have, the Grandmasters, they have a brilliant way of detaching from the past. They let go of the games they've lost, the mistakes they've made. It's gone. They're completely gone. They absorb the learning and they tend to be able to remember paths of moves that they've made, but that's it. They are emotionally neutral to their past. They just take that. And in terms of the future, they obviously have an intent. I know I'm going to take this. I know where that person is. They'll be looking behaviorally. I think they're this attack-oriented person, so I'm going to do this. But they are able to balance being absolutely here now, because if they get lost in the future, they make mistakes now. If they are stuck in the past, they are hesitant and reticent now. They are brilliant at nowing, which is a skill. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question. Yesterday was cool, was brilliant. I liked it.
Yep.
And if I want to, I could say, oh, it wasn't this, it wasn't that, it wasn't the other. That's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. I'm here now. Today is everything it's going to be. I set an intention, little intention in the morning, what today is going to be about, and that plays out.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your answer to that, and it's interesting because I asked that question of everybody that comes on the show, and just to hear the different perspectives. But this sense of now, I think that was a big reason for even getting going to start with, because this sense of always better than yesterday. Well, I was a procrastinator. And I said to myself, I couldn't be always better than yesterday if I keep putting things off until tomorrow. So it was always a call to action. But yeah, I like the way that you've taken that. So thank you. How can people connect with you? Where can they sign up for the Simple Notes?
SimonTyler.com, very easy. SimonTyler.com. There's the subscriber page in there. There's also, you can access on there all of the previously written Simple Notes. I think there's about 60 or 70 on the website. Normally we tend to close it off at 50 and then drop them out, but there's 60 or 70 on there now. And there's a link in there as well that will take you to the podcast. And they podcasts, which are me discussing the previous Simple Note in a bit more of a broader way, are on SoundCloud at Simon Tyler, and they are also in iTunes, so you can download them there.
Love that.
And the books, obviously, are available on Amazon, and enjoy as you are.
I shall link them all in the show notes. I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on.
Great questions. Love your approach and the impact you have. Thank you.
Very kind of you. I'd love for you to leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Well, I always sign off by saying keep it simple, but I really mean it. And that is, if you experience slight confusion, slight resistance, slight sense of complication, it's just a little impulse to go, oh, can I step back from this? Can I keep this simple? And I really mean it. I'm bound to say it all the time, but take the step. Things are much, much easier, faster, and more enjoyable when they're simpler.
Love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.